of such. So DCF will do an investigation.
You have a lot of other cases. You probably have a lot on your plate.
You're kind, but that's one story I should have followed back up on. No question about it.
Well, that's okay. A lot of people want to know, how does CPS become involved with a family? People have no clue.
Well, I think it's really important to understand that we have people in Massachusetts called mandated reporters, non-mandated reporters, and you can report anonymously, which means you don't have to give any information. And mandated reporters are people such as police officers, firefighters, teachers, nurses, doctors, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, the clergy now, and others that come within the purview, such as daycare, of children. And it's an attempt to try and protect children. And these individuals, pursuant to the law, have the affirmative duty that if they suspect or have suspicion of child abuse, they must report to who? To Child Protective Services. And they must file what's called a 51A, which is slang for the child abuse report. And DCF then screens the report in, and they have 3 days to decide such. And at the end of those 3 days, they either screen it in and they assign it to a 51B, which is the investigation, and an investigator. And they determine during the screening process whether that's going to be on an emergency basis where a child is at risk of harm, or whether it's going to be done non-emergency where the Child Protective Service 51B investigator has 15 days or more if they need it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, to go and investigate the case in chief.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they do the 51B investigation, there's 4 outcomes that can occur. The first is, which we all root for, is to have it unsupported. The second type is where they find substantial concern and they open up an assessment. It's kind of real murky. The substantiated concern is kind of like, well, yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, you did it, but you didn't. But there's something there. We're not sure what's here, so we're going to do a further assessment of the family, which runs another 60 days. And that's working days, not just Saturdays and Sundays and holidays. So that can go on for quite some time. The third type is when they support the decision and you have an assessment. And then the fourth type is a supported decision where there's no assessment. Very rarely do I ever see a supported decision where there's no assessment.
And what do you do? I don't know how many cases. How many cases have you had dealing with this?
Oh my heavens! I lost count a long time ago, Mary. Thousands.
Mm-hmm.
In and out of court, because you have to understand that there's 2 types of places Child Protective Services gets involved. There's cases that are outside the court, and that is where a family may have abused or neglected a child, or there's an allegation of such. So DCF will do an investigation. That's one part of the case. The second part is when it's supported and they go to what's called an assessment. And once the assessment's open, that can go on for a period of time and can go on for a very long period of time. All right? And there's also a third type of case which goes to court where the department has substantial risk of harm. They file what's called a care and protection, a petition, an affidavit in the juvenile court or the probate court, and they seek custody of the child, the children. And that's like war. It's big time problems.
Mm-hmm. Do you see a lot of that?
I do. Right now in Massachusetts, there's well over 10,000 children in foster care. That's not happenstance. Many people say, well, that'll never happen to me. And I say, how contraire. I've represented the most powerful politicians, lawyers, doctors, investment bankers. I recently had a client who was living in a house worth well over $5 million. And, he was in charge of, investments that were worth just a gazillion dollars. And, I have clients say to me all the time, well, that never happened to me. And there's a prejudice and a lack of objectivity out there because some people say, well, if you're involved with Child Protective Services, you must have deserved it. And it's just not true. There's many an innocent family. And you must remember, Mary, that Child Protective Services, and some of the best people I've ever met, and some of the worst, work for CPS. And that's true of any agency, any governmental agency, because what is DCF? What is Child Protective Services? They're the government. And there's some good people, and like everything else in life, there's some bad people. And that's true of lawyers. There's some great lawyers, and there's some not so nice lawyers. Mm-hmm. And that's true of every walk of life. Because what is CPS? They're mere mortals. They're individuals. They're human beings. I got news for you. They make mistakes. They may never admit it, but they do. And they do all the time. And so they're human beings. They're individuals. They're people. They're mere mortals. So when they make a mistake, you've got a right to what's called, if it's a supported decision, to an appeal. And if it's a substantiated concern, you have a right to a grievance, different types of appeals. So you must exercise your rights, know your time standards, know the policy, procedures, and protocols of Child Protective Services, and make sure you execute them. Make sure you're on the cutting edge, you know what you're doing, and how you're going to do it. And unfortunately, most people don't.
Mm-hmm. Right. When some people are indicated, they don't know what to do. They don't even know if they can appeal that. They just think if they're indicated with, say, emotional child abuse, they just don't know what to do about it. So they just keep going and not fight it.
That happens, Mary, from time to time. And what happens, too, is that this not only can affect you as a parent, but it also can impact your job. Mm-hmm. For example, if you're a
Hello? lying about it.
The child said that he used to sit on the comfy couch. Now, quite frankly, Mary, I had no idea what the hell the comfy couch was. But I brought it to an expert. And the expert told me, Kevin, that's a PBS program on Channel 2 in Boston. I'm like, what? Huh? You know, I was blown away. And what this guy was doing, I said, do you watch TV with your kid? He goes, every time she's over. What show do you watch? He says, the comfy couch. I said, what kind of program is it? He says, it's a PBS program. And so I went marching into an appeal and just absolutely just destroyed the social worker. Because she didn't know what the hell the comfy couch was. And then after the hearing, I told her, don't feel bad. I didn't either. But the case got dismissed. And he was thrilled. Everybody went home happy. But the point I'm making is we all can find a way to come up with money, for the most part. Now, there's some people that don't have any. And to them, my hat goes out to them. You know, find legal aid, find a pro bono lawyer, find a low-fee lawyer, do something. Now, how do you find the right lawyer? This is simple stuff, Mary. Really simple. When you go on Amazon, you look up for a product or service, what do? I look at the reviews, and so does everybody else. So the first thing you should do is see if you can speak to the lawyer's previous clients. And I used to allow clients of mine that were prospective to speak to my former clients. I mean, who knows me better than my previous clients that I worked for? Mm-hmm. And so, to me, you know, the Google, and Yahoo, and Better Business Bureau, and the Lawyers.com, and Yelp, and, you know, Facebook, and all those, you know, there's all types of places to go look about how an attorney is done. And if a lawyer has done well by previous clients, more than likely they have been battle tested and can take on a case that same or similar to yours. Now, with that said now, Mary, many a client will look for a generalist. And that's okay, but they're a jack of all trades and a master of none. When you've got a specific problem, you need to find a specific lawyer for that problem. It's like in medicine. We all know if you've got a problem with your eyes, you go to an optometrist and an ophthalmologist. We all know that if you have a problem with your teeth, you go to a dentist or an orthodontist. We all know you got a problem with your heart, you go to a cardiologist. You have a problem with a broken arm, you go see an orthopedic. You have a problem with your feet, you go see a podiatrist. Well, it's the same thing with the law. Find that lawyer with great ratings that specifically handles your type of case, whether it's a divorce, whether it's parental alienation, whether it happens to be personal injury, or wills, estates, and trusts, or whatever it is, child protective services. Find that specialist, find that expert who's got all types of reviews and is battle tested with great experience, knowledge, skill, and training that can give you what you need to get you to where you want to go. That makes sense?
Definitely. Definitely. And I think people should be looking at the reviews.
What else can you, I mean, to me, Mary, if someone calls me and says, hey, Kevin, I want to hire you, but I really want to speak to one of your clients, I'll say to them, if you speak to my client, after you're done speaking to the client, there's no more impediments, you're going to hire me. They'll say, yeah, I'll let them speak to, 50 of my clients. I don't care. Because they're all going to say the same thing, that I worked hard for them, that I got them the right result. That I was the same one on Monday as I am on Friday. Kevin never changed, that I could reach him. I mean, Mary, I love most of my clients, like 99% of my clients I just love. And they become like family to me in many ways. And this is unheard of, I give my personal cell phone to my clients. I give my legal assistant the cell phone. You say, why is that, Kevin? I have a case today where the cop showed up at my client's door. My client called me and my assistant on our personal cell phones. Now, if you had to go through the rigmarole of my office, I got great staff, Frankly and Phil and Emerita and Marty are the best. But the thing is that I might have been not available. And when the cops were there, I was afraid they were going to try and take the kids. So I talked to the social worker, and I talked to the police, and they couldn't have been nicer. And I said, do you have a search warrant? They said, no. I said, why here? We just want to see the children. So I told my client, bring the kids out. They got no marks or bruises. Because I had just seen the kids on Saturday in my office. Let's put an end to this nonsense. So now we're talking about closing the case 3 hours later. Because they said, well, we heard the kids didn't go to the doctors. False. Then he was saying, we heard the kids were in an early intervention. False. So we're in the process of getting those letters. And I said to the supervisor, that's not true. Why are you keeping the case open? And she said to me, very honestly, and I had a trial with her a couple of years ago, she says, Kevin, we're going to close the case. I said, well, get your papers ready, because I'm going to bring it. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to get this case closed. Now, everybody goes home happy, Mary. My client's thrilled. He's like, Kevin, I never would have gotten that point with DCF or CPS, Child Protective Services. But that's because he didn't know the policy, procedures, protocols. He didn't know how to handle it. And he was handling it all the wrong way. He was trying to use a sledgehammer instead of using a velvet glove to get along with these people. Say, hey, what do you got? What's the problem here? What are we struggling over? How do we get this case closed?
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Definitely.
Okay.
And then why does DCF get law enforcement involved? Why does that happen? A lot of people want to know why the police get involved.
Mary, I'm about to sneeze on myself. You ready? Bullshit. Oh, I got it all over me. Sneeze again, you keep that up. Why do you think? Just common sense, think about it. They try to intimidate, whereas a great lawyer motivates. CPS tries to intimidate, and a great lawyer will try to motivate. CPS looks at the negative. A great lawyer looks at the positive. I don't know, and to me, that's a bad social worker. But that's okay. I'm going up the food chain. I'm going to a supervisor. area program manager, area clinical manager, area director. I go to the commissioner. I go to the governor. Wherever I need to go, I'm going there. You're not gonna hurt my clients because you're hurting the children. And when you hurt the children, our society is built upon our children, and we lose sight of that. And when you hurt the parents, you're hurting the children. And so the police get a call from Child Protective Service because they're trying to intimidate. They come with guns and badges, and I get family members of the police, and friends and colleagues and graduates from law school with police officers. I have the utmost respect for police officers. But that's not serving nor protecting, going to a home to intimidate families. That's just the wrong way to go about things. And the social worker said, we tried to call, we couldn't reach them. My client says, I'll bring my call phone log for the last month, Kevin. They never called me. Why would my client lie to me? There's no reason to. I had another case where the father was out of the house, man. True story. And I had spoken to, the reason the father was out of the house because he inappropriately touched, allegedly, his granddaughter. All right. I don't know if it happened. I don't know if it did. We're all innocent until proven guilty. DCF didn't want to hear that. Child Protective Services. And I said to them, that's the law in all 50 states. Okay? Now, he had 2 young children who really wanted to see their father, which really, really affected him. He'd been out of the house for a couple of months. So I got the father's sister, who loves the children dearly, to be the conduit, to allow the father to visit with his children. He's not been convicted yet. He hadn't even been arrested at that point in time. And yet, he was already judge, jury, and hangman. They'd already said, he had sexually abused this stepdaughter. And that was just totally unfair. But not only to the father, forget the father, he's an adult. How about the children? What effect does that have on them? Shame on you, CPS. So I said to him Friday night, I'm going to have the aunt do visitation. You got a problem with that because there's no orders from the court criminal saying the father couldn't see the 2 minor children. And they mumbled, and stumbled. So Saturday morning, I come out of the shower. It's early Saturday morning. I'm getting ready to clean up and, go hit the gym and do some treadmill and whatever. And all of a sudden, I get a call from my assistant, frankly. Frankly says, Kevin, there's not 1, not 2, not 3, 4 police cars at our client's home. I'm like, what? I mean, I'm not, I didn't even eat breakfast yet. It's 30 in the morning, and DCF's there with multiple social workers too. I'm like, this is crazy. So I called the client immediately on my personal cell, who she called frankly on his personal cell, thank God. Well, I never would have known because she did call me. I found out later, but I was in the shower. So I say to her, where is the father? Because they think he's at the house. That's why the police are there. And she says, he hadn't been here in months, Kevin. I said, you know that, I know that, but I just wanted to check one last time. I said, where are your children? I'll wake them up. She got all 3 up. Now I let the social worker in and let the police, and I talked to the police before I did it. And police officer, you're there because you think the father's here. Am I correct? They said, absolutely. I said, if he's not there, you're going to leave. Is that correct? That's correct. And then what are you going to tell my clients? And what are you going to tell their children? And more importantly, with 4 police cars out front, what are you going to tell their neighbors? All of a sudden, silence. You can hear crickets. Now, DCF and the police searched the home, no father. And I said to the police, I said again, what are you going to tell these children who you've now threatened and scared half to death with your gun and your badges? 4 cops. What the hell do you need 4 cops in a home where there's a mother and 3 daughters? Because they thought the father was there. Okay? And where'd they get that from? Child Protective Services thought we were playing games with them. Well, I got news for you, Mary. If I say I'm going to do something, you can take it to the bank. You can draw interest on it. Mm-hmm. But with that said, I went after the social worker the following week and really gave her one hell of a hard time. Because you tell me you're about child protection, you just scared the crap out of 3 small tinies. That's not right, Mary. That's just so wrong. And it's an abuse of the police. They had no evidence that father was there. They had no proof. And they went, and they're famous for doing what's called child welfare checks. What garbage. It's their way of trying to get into the house. and trying to establish things that just aren't there for facts or evidence. And I've seen it over and over again. So now I feel bad for the police because they're a conduit to this nonsense. And I think that when DCF does that, my blood boils, Mary. And that's why I give my clients my personal cell phone for instances like that. And they happen, unfortunately, too often. The other cases that I hate, Mary, is when DCF goes to the schools, and
Right.
I'll just say a few things about schools. Number one, I started a school was taking the name of Abraham Lincoln off one of the schools. Mary, we cannot erase history. Good, bad, or indifferent, we must learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was an attempt, and freedom of speech is freedom if you agree with the person who you're talking to. But if you don't, no one wants to hear it. But the deal is the following, Mary. Taking the name of Abraham Lincoln off a school only tries to obscure the issue that school is not teaching Johnny or Jillian math, reading, and writing, and that our kids are not being taught well. And our schools in the inner city are just awful. And kids are struggling, and they're being relegated to poverty because not being educated. And that's just an excuse to try and eliminate or talk about a different issue. Instead of taking the name off the school, how about improving what's inside the school and educate these kids and make them smart young adults that our society can be proud of? And that's the problem. But Child Protective Services is get kids in school that sitting ducks. And far too often they go and interview kids by themselves. They take kids out of class, put them in a room, they interview them for half an hour, whatever. Apply to the police before I did it. A police officer with 4 police cars out for rules. Mary, we cannot erase history. Good, bad, or indifferent, we must learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was an attempt, and freedom of speech is freedom if you agree with the person who you're talking to. But if you don't, no one wants to hear it. But the deal is the following, Mary. Taking the name of Abraham Lincoln off a school only tries to obscure the issue that school is not teaching Johnny or Jillian math, reading, and writing, and that our kids are not being taught well. And our schools in the inner city are just awful. And kids are struggling, and they're being relegated to poverty because not being educated. And that's just an excuse to try and eliminate or talk about a different issue. Instead of taking the name off the school, how about improving what's inside the school and educate these kids and make them smart young adults that our society can be proud of? And that's the problem. But Child Protective Services is get kids at school that are sitting ducks. And far too often they go and interview kids by themselves. They take kids out of class, put them in a room, they interview them for half an hour, whatever. Kids go to school to be educated, not to be interrogated. And that's what happens. And the parents have no ability to object or get a lawyer or anything else. Now, bring me back to my other point now. The U.S. Constitution says we the people, not we the adults. Child Protective Services violates these children's rights by taking them out of class and interviewing them. Because they too have the right to counsel. They have the right to an attorney, to a barrister, to an esquire, to a lawyer. But they're not given that opportunity. And I've had Child Protective Services, I had a social worker sit there smugly and smile and tell me, I go to the schools all the time, Kevin, because I know exactly where the kids are. And I said to this smug, arrogant social worker, what effect does this have on the children? Now, Johnny or Jillian's got to go back in the classroom and tell all the classmates, why'd you leave the classroom for an hour and a half? Mm-hmm. And what are they going to say? Well, I get interviewed by Child Protective Services. And what effect does that have? Every kid in the school knows before they leave the school that day. And what do they do when they go home? What happened to school today? And every kid's going to tell their parents, well, Johnny and Jillian were interviewed by, Child Protective Services. And then what did the parents say? Ooh, the boogeyman. Mm-hmm. Abracadabra, hocus pocus, smoke and mirrors. I wouldn't hang out with those kids. And what you've done is you've ostracized those kids. And what you do to their learning? What do they think they do when they go back? Now, I say this respectfully, but I had a child that was an honor roll student. She was in the band. She was a cheerleader. She did everything. And she was aces in school. And they took her out and tried to ask her questions about her parents and domestic violence. She was 14 years old, Mary. And she came home in tears. The next day, she went back into that school, and she gave that principal a freaking licking. She told that principal, I love this school every day of my life until yesterday. I was here to be educated, not to be interrogated. I was here to learn, not to face Child Protective Service. And nobody in the school protected me. Nobody. Shame on them. Shame on that principal, that vice principal, that teacher, and Child Protective Services. That is so wrong, Mary. That is beyond wrong. And they could have done it any other time, interviewed this child. And they ruined that poor child. She was so angry and so upset. And then after that, whenever Child Protective Service would come to the home, she basically told them in uncertain terms, F you. You are not talking to me again. You had your shot at me. Because then we got back to reports. They wrote stuff that just wasn't true. She said, I didn't say that. I never said that. And it's a huge he said, she said, they said, unfortunate. Now, again, Mary, there's some great social workers, and the great ones don't do that. The great ones believe in family first. They fight for families. And I can tell you stories don't blow in the face about some of the great social workers. I know some people say, oh, what's he talking about? Trust me, Mary, there's some great social workers out there, and people that work for, Child Protective Services. I've got friends and I've got enemies in both. But the thing is that, there are some decent, honorable people that really love and care about protecting children. And that's a fact. You can take it to the bank.
Well, I had called the school and I said, what is your protocol when CPS shows up? And they said, well, we just put them in a room. I said, do you have a witness in there with the child when CPS is in there talking to the child? They said, no, we just put them in a room and they talk and whatever. I mean, they were very nonchalant about it.
Mary, I've been what's called a guardian ad litem, which is the best interest of the child. And I got to tell you, I've interviewed, countless children. And, I had a case one time where the principal was deposed. The child was in a room for an hour and a half. Mary. My God. After 10, 15 minutes, every kid starts to lose it. I don't care who they are. But an hour and a half, Mary, what in God's tarnation could you ask a child? And I just looked at that principal, and I thought to myself, damn you. You're supposed to protect these kids. And you just led that kid down the golden path, and that social worker just drilled that kid. Awful. And there's no excuse for it. I'm sorry. I have absolutely no shame in telling that principal and a social worker, you be damned. You're supposed to protect kids, and you did the complete opposite.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you.
Mary, there are some things you can do, though. It's what's called a hatch letter. And let me give you some tips for some of your people to help them with DCL. And I'll tell you some stories. When you have a child in school and you're afraid DCF is going to go there, write to the principal and tell them that your child's not to be removed except under two circumstances only. One, for educational purposes only, and number two, for emergency medical treatment. Otherwise, your child is not to be removed under any other circumstances. And they are the local parents. They're in charge of your kid. So, I've written these letters, and it doesn't go over big with the principal. That's too bad. You're not my friend. And I don't trust you to protect my children. If you feel that way, you feel as though the school's not on your side, that's what you do. Let me give you another example. I've had DCF go to families, especially women. And, as MC Hammer says, it's hammer time. Well, I got news for you, Mary. It's ladies' time. Mm-hmm. And I believe in the next 30 years that women have now going to take the world by storm. And why do I say that? Because there's so many women now going to college and graduate school and filling all types of positions. And sooner than later, women will be in control. And when they do, I think it's going to be a hell of a lot better system when it comes to Child Protective Services because they get it. So now, when a woman has a domestic violence perceived incident, the father or the police come. If there's two people, the police always arrest one person. That's just a given. It's just the way it is. It's protocol. Because if there's only one person left behind, one person can't get into an argument or, there's very rarely any problems. But if you leave the spouse in the house, whoever is the aggressor, then you can have more trouble. So the police just, they arrest somebody and just accept that as fact. Mm-hmm. So then they call, there's kids there, they call Child Protective Services. Child Protective Services, many times I've seen them come in and tell the mom, if you don't go take a restraining order out against your partner, then we're going to take your children. Now, I can't begin to tell you, Mary, how many mothers have come to me with tears in their eyes, just, Kevin, I wasn't afraid of my husband or my boyfriend or whatever. And they say, so I'll talk to him. And, I recently had a case with him, my mom came to me. Just Kevin, he's just threatening to take my children if I'm going to take a restraining order. I said, you got to get a restraining order then. So, but Kevin, I'm not in fear or even in fear of harm, which is the legal standard, with my boyfriend or my husband. I said, well, when you're under oath, you make sure you're under oath. You tell the judge exactly that. When the judge asks you, are you in fear, imminent fear? You say, no, Your Honor. And the judge is going to look at you like you got four heads and say, well, why are you here then, man? Because, Your Honor, I was threatened by DCF that I didn't come down and try to get a restraining order, that they would take my children. Well, let me tell you something, Mary. There's been more than one judge that's called Child Protective Services into the court and reprimanded them big time. Because what they're doing, they're telling mothers and fathers and people to lie under oath that you're in fear and in fear of harm, which you're not. Now, let's be clear with this, Mary. If you are in fear and if you need a restraining order, by all means, go get it. But don't use it as a sword, use it as a shield. Does that make sense, Mary?
Most definitely.
Okay. And that's the way around that. Now, I had another woman that, was threatened that if she went and got a lawyer, which DCF gives parents what's called a parent, it says you're entitled to a lawyer, said if you go get a lawyer, we're going to take your kids. Okay? What choice did she have? Zero. Now, obviously, we reversed that. But, this woman had no reason to lie to me. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely no reason to lie to me. Now, there are cases, Mary, where, I've had parents come to me and I turn away more cases than I take in, where the parents have made mistakes and they're unable or unwilling to accept responsibility for what they've done wrong. I had a client that was up on the third floor and he went out on a Sunday night and he had a little bit too much to drink, watching the football game, Sunday night football, came home and got into a disagreement with his wife. And he tried to take her phone and the phone busted. They got to a scuffle. And, the son was on the basement. So that's 3 floors below. He could hear them yelling and screaming. And he told Child Protective Services that. He told the truth. And I said to the client, I can't support this. I mean, I'd love to appeal it, and I'd love to take your money. I can't do that. And he got really mad at me. He says, I got a wheelbarrow full of cash. I want to hire you. If I want to hire you, that's my option to hire you. I said, no, it's not. No, it's not. Now, there's different things. And I know you had, different guests on. I've listened to quite a few of your Slam the Gavel podcasts, which I've really enjoyed. But, this objectivity goes out the window. For example, when there's sexual abuse, it's like a nuclear bomb. Everything comes to a stop. And until we figure out what is or is not going on. And it's really, really tough. Those are really difficult, tough cases. And ironically, when somebody is innocent, the onion starts to unravel and the truth does come out. But you've gotta be patient. You've gotta be willing to fight. And you gotta be willing to stand up and say, I didn't do this. You prove that you didn't do this with evidence and documents and experts like we've had Dean Taunton show, those type of people that can testify, that can tell right from wrong and who's what, what's who. And again, sometimes it can get expensive. And some people don't have the financial wherewithal, Mary. That's why some people don't succeed. Not because they're guilty, but because they don't have the money. Now, one of the biggest things I run into, Mary, all the time is, people say, well, I got nothing to hide, so I let Child Protective Services into my home. But what they don't understand is that the first time, you ride a bike or you are on a skateboard or you do an activity, you're not very good at it. And that's the same as being interrogated by the DCF or Child Protective Services investigator. You're not going to do well. But more importantly, your children are not going to do very well. So it all comes down to, if you want to be successful, you got to have a plan. You got to have a step-by-step, easy guided plan. So that you're prepared, your children are prepared, your home prepared to assure that the allegation is false and stays false. Many times people just don't have clarity, don't have planners, don't think. And when DCF starts asking them questions, they just do awful at it. And they don't give them the right documentation that DCF's looking for. And then they let their children be interviewed alone. And DCF, Child Protective Services will ask your children all types of questions. I wouldn't allow my son to be interviewed by Child Protective Services under any circumstances ever. Because even if you're telling the truth, there was a recent case where it's been stated that 31% of the children were innocent, yet they were convicted by their own statements in criminal court. Now, that's a higher standard than Child Protective Services, but the point being is that you also look at the Innocent Project, where many people have been convicted and then found to be innocent because of DNA, which leads us to believe that eyewitness testimony and eyewitness identification is very faulty. And so is a child's memory, their ability to tell the truth and understand the truth from a falsehood, their ability to relay a story, their ability to remember what happened a week or 2 weeks or a month ago. So there's all types of factors that play into why you don't want to meet with Child Protective Services unless you have an advocate, a lawyer for yourself. Does that make sense, Mary?
Oh, definitely. Now, have you ever run across a parent telling you, this is all one-sided? They didn't interview, our side of the family? Have you ever run across that?
Many times, Mary. Mm-hmm. When you hire a lawyer, Child Protective Services is going to have to do the right thing, because that lawyer is going to walk you through and make sure that everything, you dot the I's, you cross the T's. I just recently had a case where 2 young children, they were, very young, alleged that the father had, abused them. And it was just, it was crazy because this happened during vacation. His family went out of state because the father's family lived out of state. And when they were out of state, they were with his side of the family, which is parents. He had 4 other siblings with their significant others, so there's 8, 10 people. You had aunts and uncles and grandparents. You had 30 people around these kids at all times. Mm-hmm. Now, when in God's name could they have found time to abuse these kids? It was a super vacation for parents because they didn't have to be parents. Everybody else was just gaga goo goo over these kids. So parents actually got to go out on a date, which is unheard of. They got to go and move the kids with family. Mm-hmm. They were never with the kids. And yet Child Protective Services, much to their credit, did speak to the family. Now, there are other cases where that didn't happen. So what you do is you appeal that, and you bring in the family members, and you get the social worker under oath, and you say, you had mom and dad, correct? And you say, yeah. Mom and dad had family. Is that correct? Yeah. But you didn't speak to any of them, did you? No, I did not. And they gave you the phone numbers. Is that correct? That's correct. And you put the family members on the stand. You have them testify as to what did or did not happen on appeal. And it sounds simple sometimes. It is, sometimes it's not. But what you want to do, Mary, is go back down the road and find out there's certain things that these, Child Protective Services has to do during the investigation. Make sure they dot the I's, cross the T's. And to me, Mary, I like helping Child Protective Services, to get the case closed and unsupported by giving them the information and making the job easy. I mean, Mary, don't we like people to make that job easy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I do it all the time. I get them the records, I get them the documents, and I ask them, what are you struggling over? What is it you wish you had, you don't have? I'll go get it. And so, when all is said and done, if you give them what they want, they're going to rule in your favor because it's the right thing. Not because you're pulling a fast one, you're being dishonest, but it's because you prove your case. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, on the case, they said recently my client, was physically abusing the children. Okay? I got the medical records. Sent the kids to the doctor. The medical records, there was no marks or bruises, and the kids were fine. The doctor said the kids were fine. No potential concerns. So now they throw that out. Then they try to rely on, well, they neglected the kids. Why did they neglect them? They stumble with that allegation. But in the final analysis, they unsupported it. And that's all that mattered.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to be vigilant. Just understand what you're up against and how to get to where you need to go.
This was excellent. Is there any last words you can offer to a parent that might be questioning if they have been lied on?
Well, let's be clear about lying, real quick on lying. We've lied to kids our whole life, and our kids will lie to their kids. Let's start with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yeah.
And you got Blitzen, and you got Comet, you got Cupid. You got Dancer, Dasher, Donna, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got Blitzen, and you got all these different reindeer. And we lie. You tell them about Santa Claus and how he comes down the chimney, Mrs. Claus, and make gifts with the elves while you're right. We lie to our kids. Peter Cottontail. How about the Tooth Fairy?
Mm-hmm.
And we stole superheroes. Then we wonder why kids lie.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the information I want to tell the parents is that never, ever, ever, ever give up. Just like Winston Churchill said. And do your very best to be courteous and kind to all. And the truth will show its ugly head. But the last comment I think is most important is that when you're dealing with Child Protective Services, you must muster the evidence. You must muster what is the evidence. For example, when you call the social worker or whoever you call in the Child Protective Services, you want to follow it up immediately with an email that you called. Today's Monday, August 16, 2021. Then you want to follow it up and take that email and mail it to everybody at Child Protective Services. So they can't say, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't get your email. I didn't get your letter. No. What you want to do is you want to communicate with clarity and clearness. You want to make sure that everybody understands what they're supposed to do and then go do it. Do not fight with Child Protective Services. I'm not saying roll over and play dead for them. That is not the court's child, the judge's child, CPS's child. That's your child. Go fight with everything that's in your human body. Get your child, your most precious, precious, precious asset home. Leave no stone unturned. Mm-hmm. Don't take any prisoners.
Excellent advice. This was a great, great discussion we had. How can people find you?
Well, I want to give people a website that they can join. It's free, and it's got people from all over the country and also the world. And it's called Successfully Fight Child Protective Services. I'm the moderator of the group, and there's people in there that are just 10 times as smart as I am that have been where a lot of these parents are going or will go, and they'll offer free advice and support and a pat on the shoulder, and sometimes a kick in the ass. But it's all good. It's called Successfully Fight Child Protective Services. Mary, I'm in Boston. I practice only in Boston, in Massachusetts. I'm licensed only in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I do advise clients from time to time outside the state, but I don't appear in court outside of Massachusetts. And, I'm in Boston. I'm easy to find. My last name, you take the word Beaver, take away the B in Beaver, put an S in it, and you got my last name, Kevin Patrick Sieber, S-E-A-B-E-R. You just ring me up on the internet, whether it's on Google or, on my website, which is SieberDCFlawyer.com. That's Sieber, S-E-A-B-E-R, DCFlawyer.com. All one word. So I'm easy to find, Mary. And I try to help people on Successfully Fight Child Protective Services. Every day I try to do one good deed, one good karma to help somebody somewhere, somehow get to where they need to go. And to me, there's so many people out there that need help. I'm going to leave you one last statistic before we go. 1/3 of every child in America, 1/3, Mary, will be involved with Child Protective Services at some point in their life. And the reason that no one talks about it is because everybody's ashamed and appalled and embarrassed to admit they're involved with Child Protective Services. And, no one wants to talk about it, okay? And no one wants to accept it. And those that are involved with Child Protective Services, those on the other side of the fence say, well, they must deserve that. And then they'll say, well, I'm not some crack-addicted whore down on Green Street in Boston. That's not me. I don't have a substance abuse problem. I don't have alcohol or drugs. I don't have mental health problems. But you know something? Your neighbor might, or your brother might, or your cousin might, or your colleague might. There's so many people out there that people don't understand and realize are involved with Child Protective Services and need help again. And they may have an issue. But, I think that, we can overcome all of this. And I think we need to keep family with family. Family first, Mary. Most important thing in our lives is our family. Everybody says it, but why don't we practice it, Mary? I don't get it.
I'm with you. Well, thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Mary. It was a privilege, a pleasure, and an honor. And I thank you for having me. And I wish you a good day, and I wish you goodbye.
Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in the family courtrooms. I'm your host,